Hello Orchid Maniacs, it's Yeva again, and it's time for January update. And you're gonna be sick of my Phals, so I'm not gonna talk about them. I'm just gonna show you something. Do you see this bloom? It's touching the window, and since it's cold, it got cold burn. It doesn't focus. Come on, focus. Do you see that petal on the left side? That's cold damage. This flower has been touching the window, and we had a pretty cold week at the beginning of January, so, well, yeah. Now I've kind of missed a December update, but I don't have that many plants in bloom, so it's gonna be short. And I had some Miltoniopsis and some NoID in bloom this month, but now they've faded. But you're gonna see them in other videos if you haven't already, because I have a watering video and so on. This is it's not an orchid, it's a Stapelia, grandiflora, and this year it didn't want to grow in summer because it was too cold for it, and it grew all those new growths in autumn when I brought it inside, and now it's starting to bloom, and I'm gonna die in here because this is my bedroom. And if you don't know, this particular plant has a very stinky smell, and it attracts flies to pollinate it, so it smells like like rotting meat. And this is what it looks like a few days later. I don't feel any smell yet, but it might be because it's not sunny. As soon as the sun hits it, it's gonna stink really, really bad. It's a beautiful bloom. I love those hair. One more Phal. This is my mini mark that doesn't stop blooming. It just goes on and on and on. It's been in bloom when I bought it in September, and now it's January, and it had 3 flower spikes. The other 2 have stopped blooming, but this one just keeps extending and blooming, so that's nice. And if you remember this Cattleya, it had some color streaks on the blooms, and now the blooms have faded, but I don't think it's a virus because, as I said, those streaks were very symmetrical. It bloomed better than ever. It grew the growth bigger than ever, and it doesn't have any other symptoms. And one more thing, that virus plants usually don't bloom for very long, and this one lasted for a whole month, so it's not a virus. Of course, I don't know that, and I'm gonna have to wait for another blooming, but I don't think it's a virus. And this yellow thing is NoID Cattleya. It opened a few more blooms on a different growth now, and I really like the color. They're not fragrant, but the color is wonderful. One more Phal, just to annoy you. And there in the background is my Sharry baby. It finally opened one of its spikes. And, well, the fragrance right now is not overwhelming, so I'm quite happy about it, because Sharry babies have a very strong fragrance, and when they bloom with lots of blooms, it can actually be overwhelming a little bit in a confined space. But it also has 2 more flower spikes that are going to open very soon, so I might have to take it to some other room. Yeah, my NoID and my 2 Miltoniopsis are fading already, but I've noticed that my Herr Alexandre Miltoniopsis is also growing a spike. if it focuses. There you go. So I'm gonna have some more blooms. And my Dendrobium Phalaenopsis type, or a bigibbum, I think it's a bigibbum actually. It finally grew this flower spike, and the second one is still not growing. I think it's a bit too cold for it in here because Phalaenopsis type Dendrobiums like warmer temperatures. And this plant also had a major root loss this year, so it's a little bit set back and it's quite slow. And that's the reason why it only has 2 blooms now. Now this is my Dendrobium unicum, and it just opened recently. Let me get it out. It is supposed to be fragrant, but I don't feel any fragrance yet. And I can tell it's an unicum because the flower looks like Dendrobium unicum. If you don't know, there are several other species that look very similar to this plant, and I'm gonna make a video about this species. And one of my mishap Masdevallias are actually spiking. It's quite okay now. It's grown a few new growths and decided to spike again. Actually, they are all doing okay. The only problem is with this one, because it's in such a small pot. I have to keep an eye on it because it dries out very quickly. And my Cymbidiums are still blooming. This one and this Saragine. Ice Cascade is still in bloom. And the third one is very slow. But it's still, at least it started growing those flower sparks, because they were completely stopped at some point. Now this is a special one for Roger Frampton, if you still watch my videos. You've asked people how to make Phals bloom, and I've answered that some of your plants might be too small. Well, this is what I mean actually. I don't mean the size. This is a miniature Phalaenopsis, if you can see, compared to the size of others. And it's in full bloom. But let's see how many leaves it has. Well, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 leaves. And it's blooming very close to the bottom of the plant. It could actually bloom below the 3rd leaf from the top, but 1, 2, 3, so here. But if you can see, there's very little space in here. The space between those 2 leaves and between those are quite different. So I'm expecting this space will bloom next year. And this one will probably bloom maybe next or even later. So yeah, that's what I mean when I say that some of your plants are not big enough to bloom. And I mean that the plant has to have enough leaves, and the spaces between the leaves have to be long enough. If you have the bottom leaves that are dried and that have dried and dropped, they are not gonna bloom from this section anymore. This is a long stem, but it's not gonna bloom anymore. They only bloom from green parts of the stem. So again, this is a big Phal, and 1, 2, 3 leaves, a flower spike below the 3rd one, below the 4th one, because the sections between the leaves are large. And right here we have a rescue Phal, which has only got 4 leaves, but it has also got a flower spike and only 4 flowers on it. And again, it's completely normal. The plant hasn't got enough strength to bloom properly. So the more mass the plant has, the better the blooming. And this is another rescue Phal, and it's only got 4 leaves again, but there are no spaces between the leaves, so it didn't bloom this year. And again, this is completely normal. So basically what that means is, since Phalaenopsis don't have pseudobulbs, they don't have a way to accumulate the energy. So in order to bloom with a lot of blooms and robust flower spikes, they need a lot of leaves and roots. So they need a lot of biomass to be able to produce enough energy and to store it, because the only way a Phal can store energy is in its leaves and in its stem. So when the plant is like this one, it's only got 4 leaves and it's not very healthy, well, that's the result. Only 4 blooms. And they are not, I'm sure they are not as big as they can be. Well, I haven't seen it in proper bloom because, as I said, it's a rescue Phal. I've got it from a co-worker, and I don't know how it's supposed to bloom, but I'm sure it should have larger blooms. And this one, it's even more ill. It didn't have all too many roots, and since it doesn't have a very good leaf system, it doesn't bloom. Now these 3 Phals, well actually 4, this one too, I bought them all in summer and they were all in bloom, so they don't bloom now, and it's quite normal because they need to adjust and adapt and to change their life cycle, because they should grow in summer and bloom in winter. Well, this one is actually doing something here, but it's only because I didn't cut the spike. So I don't expect them to bloom this winter, and I'm gonna wait till next winter, and that's completely normal. And this Phal, for instance, I've got it as a present last winter, and it was in bloom. It had 2 flower spikes, and since it's a good and healthy plant, I repotted it, but I should have chosen the bigger pot. It's fallen over now. And this winter it decided to bloom again, and the blooming is just as good as the first one was. So even though the nurseries do use a lot of fertilizer and good light and good watering regime and humidity and everything to make the plants bloom faster and stronger, it doesn't mean that the same plants shouldn't bloom as robust when they get to our home environment. It's all up to the care. So thank you all for watching, and goodbye.